stood on the bridge of the warship and looked at the planet below. It was a small world, covered in blue oceans and green lands. The humans called it Prime. To the hegemony, it was just another world to conquer. Had done this many times before. He had fought in 40 campaigns across the galaxy. He had watched countless species fall before the might of his people. This would be no different. There were tall reptilian beings with scales the color of dark stone and eyes like burning embers. They had ruled the stars for 1,000 years. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever come close. When the hegemony wanted a world, they took it. This was the natural order of things. The strong conquered. The weak submitted. This was the only truth had ever known. The humans have been in space for only 300 years, said Fleet Commander, studying the tactical display. Our intelligence says they are weak, soft, they will break quickly. Nodded. He had heard similar words before every conquest. The enemy was always supposed to be weak. The enemy always fell. There was no reason to think these humans would be any different. Begin the assault, commanded. The troop carriers descended through the atmosphere like metal rain. Was aboard the third carrier, surrounded by warriors he had fought beside for years. They checked their weapons and spoke quietly about the victory feast that would follow. Some joked about how quickly the humans would surrender. Others wondered if human slaves would be useful or if they would need to kill them all. Then the first carrier exploded. Felt the shockwave hit his own ship. Through the viewing port he saw debris falling through the clouds. Orange flames spread across the sky. A second later, another carrier was struck. Then a third. The humans had weapons pointed at the sky, and they were firing with deadly accuracy. Impossible, whispered the warrior beside. No one has ever destroyed our carriers during descent. But the humans had done exactly that. By the time the remaining carriers reached the ground, 3 ships were gone. Hundreds of warriors had died before the battle even began. Stepped out onto human soil with a strange feeling in his chest. He did not know what to call it yet. The colony's main city spread out before them. It was called Harmon City, a settlement of perhaps 200,000 humans. Smoke rose from buildings where the orbital bombardment had struck. The commanders expected the survivors to flee or surrender. That was what conquered people always did. The humans did neither. The unit advanced toward the outer districts, weapons ready for the easy victory they had been promised. They found the streets empty at first. The silence felt wrong. Then the shooting started. Human soldiers appeared from windows, rooftops, and doorways. They fired with weapons that should have been primitive compared to technology, but the humans did not seem to care about the odds. They shot and moved, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. A warrior fell beside, struck by 3 rounds to the chest. Another went down moments later. The humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were hunting. Saw a human soldier step out from behind cover to pull a wounded comrade to safety. They would never do such a thing. Wounded warriors were left to die or to finish the battle on their own. But this human risked his life to save another. Aimed his weapon at the exposed soldier, but before he could fire, the human had already disappeared into a ruined building with his wounded friend. The battle raged for hours. By sunset, this unit had advanced only 2 city blocks. They had lost 18 warriors. The humans had lost perhaps a dozen, but they had retreated in good order, falling back to new positions, setting traps, making the pay for every step. That night sat in a bombed-out building and tried to understand what had happened. In 40 campaigns, he had never seen anything like this. Other species fought back, yes, but they always broke eventually. They saw the strength of the hegemony and they surrendered. Their will to fight simply died. The humans showed no sign of breaking. If anything, they seemed to fight harder as the battle continued. When one fell, others took their place. When they ran out of ammunition, they threw rocks and swung metal pipes. One human, cornered and wounded, had pulled the pins from explosive devices strapped to his body and charged into a group of warriors. 6 of his comrades had died in that blast. "What kind of beings are these?" asked young warrior, nursing a wound on his arm. "They are smaller than us, weaker. Why do they not fear us?" Had no answer. He had asked himself the same question 100 times that day. They were feared across the galaxy. Their name alone had caused civilizations to surrender without a fight. But these humans looked at the war machine and did not flinch. Reports came in from other units across the city. Every squad told the same story: heavy resistance, unexpected casualties. The humans were not just defending their city, they were making the bleed for it. Commander addressed the troops that night through their communication devices. "The humans are proving more troublesome than expected," he said. "But do not be concerned. They cannot hold out forever. In a few days they will exhaust their supplies and their will to fight. Victory is certain." Listened to the commander's words, but for the first time in his life, he was not sure he believed them. He had seen the look in the eyes of the humans they had fought today. There was no surrender in those eyes. There was no fear. There was only a burning, fierce determination that had never encountered before. He lay down to rest, but sleep did not come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the humans. He saw them fighting, dying, and refusing to give up. Something was stirring inside him, a cold sensation that started in his chest and spread through his body. Did not know it yet, but he was learning to feel dread. True dread. The kind that comes when you realize you may have finally met an enemy you cannot defeat. The battle for Harmon City entered its second week, and everything thought he knew about war was crumbling. They had conquered cities on hundreds of worlds. Urban combat was supposed to be simple. You surrounded the enemy, cut off their supplies, and waited for them to starve or surrender. It had always worked before. The humans refused to follow the rules of war that every other species obeyed. This unit was assigned to capture a communications building in the eastern part of the city. The mission was supposed to take 3 days. On the 10th day, they were still fighting floor by floor, room by room. The humans had turned every hallway into a killing ground. They set traps in doorways. They collapsed sections of ceiling on advancing warriors. When the power went out, they fought in the dark, where their smaller size became an advantage. On the 11th day, found himself alone in a smoke-filled corridor. His unit had been scattered during a sudden human counterattack. He moved carefully, weapon raised, listening for any sound that might warn him of danger. He heard breathing, ragged, wet breathing that spoke of serious wounds. Following the sound, he found a human soldier slumped against a wall. It was a female, her uniform soaked with blood. She was young, perhaps 20 of their years. One of her legs was bent at a wrong angle, and she held a small pistol in a shaking hand. Stepped into view. The human saw him and raised her weapon. She was dying. Any fool could see that. She had lost too much blood. She could barely hold the gun steady. By every rule of sense and survival, she should have dropped the weapon and begged for mercy. She did not. The human opened fire. The first shot went wide, striking the wall beside his head. The second hit his armor but did not pierce it. She kept shooting until the weapon clicked empty, and still her arm did not fall. She threw the empty gun at him. It bounced off his chest. Then, incredibly, she began to crawl. Her wounded leg dragged uselessly behind her as she pulled herself across the floor toward a fallen knife that lay just out of reach. She was going to keep fighting. She was going to fight until her body simply stopped working. Stood frozen. He had killed thousands of enemies across 40 campaigns. Ending a life meant nothing to him. It was as natural as breathing. But he could not make himself raise his weapon against this small, broken human who refused to stop fighting. The human reached the knife. She grabbed it and turned to face him, holding the blade out with a trembling arm. Blood was pooling beneath her. She had minutes to live at most, but her eyes burned with a fire that had never seen in any creature. She spoke. Her voice was weak but clear. Did not understand her language, but he would never forget the words. He would later have them translated. "You will never break us." Then she spat blood at his feet, a final act of defiance from a dying warrior. Heard footsteps behind him. Others were approaching. He made a decision he did not understand. He stepped back into the shadows and let them pass. When the medical teams came later to collect the wounded, the human was still alive. Barely. They took her away, watched and said nothing. When his commander asked about survivors, said there were none. It was the first lie he had ever told in his military career. The days that followed brought more of the same, more fighting, more death. The humans had turned the entire city into a fortress. They knew every street, every building, every sewer tunnel. They attacked from nowhere and vanished like ghosts. They bombed their own buildings to deny them to the... They flooded streets with water to slow vehicle movements. They did everything possible to make the invaders suffer. Saw civilians join the fighting. Old men picked up weapons dropped by fallen soldiers. Women carried ammunition to fighters on the front lines. Children guided soldiers through back alleys and hidden passages. The entire population had become an army. "They are mad," said during a command meeting. "They send untrained civilians against our warriors. What do they hope to achieve?" Said nothing, but he thought he understood. The humans were not fighting to win. They knew they were outnumbered and they were fighting to make the victory as costly as possible. They were fighting to show that taking human worlds would never be easy. They were fighting because they simply could not do anything else. Reports arrived from Hegemony High Command. This was supposed to be a simple conquest, completed in 12 standard cycles. It had been 40 cycles, and the still did not control the city. Casualties had reached levels not seen in centuries. For the first time in memory, reinforcements were being sent to finish a colonial acquisition. The High Lords were angry. They demanded answers. How could a young species with primitive technology hold out against the greatest military force in the galaxy? What was wrong with the commanders on the ground? Why was this taking so long? Ordered more aggressive tactics. They began executing prisoners in public places, hopping to break the population's will. It had the opposite effect. For every execution, 10 more humans picked up weapons. The fighters became more daring, more willing to die, more determined to make the invaders pay. One night, walked through a captured district and saw a wall covered in human writing. Someone had painted words in red, large enough to be seen from far away. He had a translation device and pointed it at the message. "This is our home. We will die for it, will you?" Stared at those words for a long time. He thought about his own home world, a place he had not seen in 20 years. Would he die for it? Would any die for a piece of ground, a city, a world? They fought for glory, for conquest, for the hegemony. They fought because it was their purpose. But the humans were fighting for something different. They were fighting for their children, their families, their future. The dying soldier's words echoed in his mind. "You will never break us." He was beginning to believe she was right. That night dreamed of the human woman with the knife. In his dream, she stood tall and whole, surrounded by thousands of other humans, all of them looking at him with those burning eyes. They did not attack. They did not speak. They just watched him with a fierce patience that made his scales prickle with cold. He woke covered in sweat, his heart's pounding. The feeling that had started in his chest on the first day of battle was growing stronger. It was dread, pure, true dread, and was beginning to understand that it would never go away. 3 months into the campaign, was no longer the warrior he had been. The things he had seen and done on Prime had changed something deep inside him. He went through the motions of a soldier, following orders and fighting when required, but his mind was somewhere else. It was trapped in an endless loop of questions he could not answer. He watched the humans and tried to understand them. They were physically weaker than their technology was less advanced. Their population was smaller. By every measure the hegemony used to judge a species, the humans should have been easy to conquer. Yet here they were, 3 months into what was supposed to be a 12-day operation, still fighting. Had been taught since birth that they were the greatest race in the galaxy. They were stronger, smarter, and more advanced than anyone else. Other species existed to serve them or to be swept aside. This was the natural order. This was the truth. But if that truth was correct, why were the humans still standing? He saw their courage every day. He saw wounded soldiers refuse to retreat. He saw mothers shield their children with their own bodies. He saw old men pick up weapons and charge into battle knowing they would die. The humans did not fight like a species that knew it was beaten. They fought like they believed they could win. Maybe they could. The thought came to late one night as he sat alone in a ruined building. It was a dangerous thought, the kind that could get a warrior executed for treason. But once it entered his mind, he could not push it away. The hegemony had never faced an enemy like this. What if the humans were the species that finally stopped them? The next day, everything changed. Commander gathered the officers for a special briefing. The situation was not improving. The hegemony high lords were demanding results. New orders had arrived. The commanders were to make an example of the human population. They would select prisoners and execute them in the central square. They would show the humans what happened to those who resisted the hegemony. This was standard practice. They had done this on many conquered worlds. Fear was a weapon just like any other. Kill enough civilians and the survivors would lose their will to fight. It had always worked before. Was assigned to the execution squad. He stood with 11 other warriors as the prisoners were brought out. There were 20 humans in total, men, women, and 3 children. They had been selected at random from the captured population. Their only crime was being human. The prisoners were lined up against a wall. Some of them were crying. Others stood silent, their faces hard. One old man held the hands of 2 small children, whispering something to them. A woman held a baby close to her chest, rocking gently to keep the infant calm. Looked at them, he saw their fear, but he also saw something else. Even now, facing death, the humans held themselves with a strange dignity. The old man's eyes met, and there was no begging in them. There was only a quiet anger, a final defiance that death could not touch. "Ready weapons," the squad leader commanded. Raised his weapon. His hands were steady. They had always been steady. He had killed many times before and never felt anything. But as he looked down the sight at the old man and the children, something inside him twisted and broke. Or maybe something woke up. Aim. Shifted his weapon slightly. Instead of pointing at the prisoners, it was now pointed at the squad leader. Fire. Fired, the squad leader fell dead before he even understood what was happening. Spun and fired again, dropping another warrior. Chaos erupted. The others scrambled for cover, confused and terrified. One of their own had turned on them. "Run!" shouted at the prisoners in broken human speech. He had learned a few words over the months. Run now. The humans did not need to be told twice. They scattered, fleeing into the ruined streets while provided covering fire. He killed 3 more warriors before the rest organized themselves. By then, the prisoners had disappeared into the maze of destroyed buildings. Ran. He was a traitor now, a dead warrior walking. The hegemony would hunt him without mercy. His own people would tear him apart if they caught him. He had thrown away 40 years of service, 40 campaigns, everything he had ever known. And for what? For a group of alien prisoners he would never see again. No, he had done it for himself. He had done it because he could not be the creature the hegemony had made him. Not anymore. The humans had shown him something. They had shown him that there was another way to be. You could fight for something other than conquest. You could protect the weak instead of destroying them. You could choose to be more than a weapon. For 3 days, hid in the ruins of Harmon City. He moved at night and slept during the day. He heard patrols searching for him, their commanders screaming about the traitor who must be found and executed. He also heard humans. They were still fighting, still resisting, still refusing to surrender. On the fourth day, they found him. A group of human fighters surrounded the building where he was hiding, heard them coming and did not try to run. He was tired of running. He sat against a wall and waited for death. The humans would kill him. He was the enemy. It was only right. But when the humans burst through the door, weapons raised, they did not fire. Their leader, a woman with gray hair and hard eyes, studied him carefully. "You are the one," she said, "the one who saved the prisoners." Nodded slowly. The woman looked at him for a long moment. Then she lowered her weapon. "My name is Captain Sam Tors," she said. "I think we need to talk." The human resistance fighters did not trust. He understood this. They had every reason to hate him. His people had destroyed their city, killed their families, and tried to enslave their world. The fact that he had saved a group of prisoners did not erase what he was. Captain Sam Tors kept him alive because he was useful. He knew tactics, their patrol schedules, and their communication codes. His knowledge saved human lives, but the other fighters kept their distance. Some looked at him with hatred. Others simply refused to see him at all, treating him like a piece of furniture that happened to be in their way. Accepted this. He did not expect forgiveness. He was not sure he deserved it. The resistance had made their base in the tunnels beneath the city. It was a network of old maintenance passages, sewers, and underground storage areas that they had never found. Hundreds of fighters lived down here, along with civilians who had nowhere else to go. It was dark and crowded and smelled of things preferred not to think about, but it was safe. The first person to show real kindness was a young medic named Chris Palmer. He was thin and quiet, with hands that never seemed to stop moving. When was injured during a sweep that nearly discovered their tunnels, Chris treated his wounds without being ordered to. "Why do you help me?" asked, genuinely confused. "I am your enemy." Chris shrugged as he wrapped a bandage around his arm. "You were hurt. I am a medic. That is what I do." "But my people have killed many of yours." "And you killed some of your own people to save ours," Chris replied. "That counts for something." He finished the bandage and gave a small smile. "Besides, you looked hungry earlier. Here." He pressed a small food bar into his hand. "It tastes terrible, but it will keep you alive." Stared at the food bar. It was a small thing worth almost nothing, but to him it meant everything. A human had chosen to help him, not because of orders, not because of strategy, simply because he needed help. Over the weeks that followed, began to learn what it meant to be human. He watched them gather around small fires in the tunnels, sharing stories and laughter despite the death that surrounded them. They talked about people they had lost, places they had loved, and dreams they still carried. One soldier played a stringed instrument and sang songs that made others cry. They held hands and hugged each other and said words of comfort that did not fully understand. They did not do these things. They did not hug. They did not sing. They did not comfort each other. Weakness was despised. Emotion was dangerous. A warrior was supposed to be hard, cold, and alone. But the humans were not weak because they loved each other. They were strong because of it. Their bonds made them fight harder, sacrifice more, and never give up. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for every person huddled in these dark tunnels. That kind of strength was something they had never understood. An old teacher named George Hayes took it upon himself to educate about human history. He had white hair and gentle eyes, and he spoke with patience even when struggled to understand. "We have fought many wars," George explained one evening. "Terrible wars. We have done awful things to each other throughout our history, but we have also done beautiful things. We have built great cities and created great art. We have explored our world and reached for the stars. Every time we have been knocked down, we have gotten back up. That is who we are." "You have conquered each other," said slowly, trying to understand. "Like the hegemony conquers other worlds." "Yes," George admitted. "We have, but we have also learned. Slowly, painfully, we have learned that conquest is not the answer. We are still learning. We are not perfect, but we try to be better, and we never stopped trying. Word came that a human relief fleet was approaching the system. Intelligence said they would arrive in 2 weeks. If the Resistance could capture the main spaceport, the fleet would be able to land and bring reinforcements. It was a desperate plan, but it was their only chance. Captain Torres called a meeting. The spaceport was heavily defended. The attack would cost many lives, but if they succeeded, they could win the war. She asked for volunteers. Every fighter in the room raised their hand. Every single one raised his hand too. Torres looked at him for a long moment. "You understand what you are volunteering for," she said. "If we fail, you die. If we succeed and my superiors do not accept you, you still die. There is no safe path for you." "I know," replied, "but I have chosen my side. I will fight with you." The battle for the spaceport was the worst fighting had ever experienced. They attacked at dawn, using tunnels he had helped them find to bypass the outer defenses. They were caught by surprise but recovered quickly. What followed was hours of close combat, street by street, building by building. Fought alongside humans he had once called enemies. He used his knowledge of tactics to predict their movements and create openings for the Resistance fighters. He called out warnings in his own language, confusing the defenders. He killed warriors he had once called brothers. Many humans died. Chris Palmer was hit by enemy fire while trying to reach a wounded fighter. He died in his arms, still smiling that gentle smile. "Keep going," he whispered. "Do not stop." Did not stop. By sunset, the spaceport was theirs. The human flag rose over the control tower as the first ships from the relief fleet descended from the sky. Captain Torres found standing among the fallen, covered in blood, both human and. She extended her hand. It was dirty with smoke and blood. "You fought well," she said simply. "Today you were one of us." Took her hand. In that moment, he finally understood the emotion that had been growing inside him since the first day of battle. It was not just dread. It was also respect. And somewhere beneath it all, something that might have been love. The human relief fleet brought more than just soldiers and supplies. It brought a message that changed everything. The attack on Prime had united all of humanity. Colonies that had been rivals for generations were now allies. Resources were being shared. Fleets were being combined. For the first time in their history, humans were fighting as one people. Admiral Rachel, commander of the relief fleet, landed at the spaceport to meet with the Resistance leaders. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a voice that made people listen. When she saw standing among the human fighters, she stopped walking. She said flatly, "Explain." Captain Torres stepped forward. He saved civilian prisoners from execution and has been fighting with us for weeks. He helped us take this spaceport. Many of us would be dead without his knowledge of tactics." The Admiral studied for a long moment. He could see her thinking, weighing risks and benefits. Finally, she nodded once. "The enemy of my enemy," she said. "We can use what you know." She walked past him into the command center without another word. It was not a warm welcome, but had not expected one. He was still alive. For now, that was enough. The human commanders asked to address them. They wanted to know about military structure, their weaknesses, their fears. Gave them everything they asked for and more. He told them about patrol patterns and communication codes. He explained how officers thought and how they made decisions. He drew maps of their defensive positions and identified their supply lines. But when he finished with the tactical information, he said something that made them all pay attention. "You have done something no other species has ever done," told the gathered officers. "You have made the afraid." The room went quiet. "I have seen it," he continued. "I have heard the whispers in the barracks. I have seen the doubt in the eyes of warriors who have never doubted before. The hegemony expected to crush you in 12 days. It has been months and you are still fighting. Every day that passes, more soldiers begin to wonder if this war can be won." He paused, looking at their faces. these small, fragile creatures who had taught him what true strength meant. Fear spreads, said softly. It moves through whispers and silence. It grows in the minds of soldiers who have watched their comrades fall to an enemy that refuses to die. You have planted a seed of doubt in the heart of the hegemony, and it will grow. Admiral leaned forward. You believe we can defeat them? I believe they have never faced anything like you, replied. The hegemony knows how to conquer. They do not know how to fight an enemy that refuses to be conquered. Every world they have taken has eventually submitted. You do not submit, and that terrifies them. The final assault began 3 days later. The combined human forces attacked the remaining positions across the planet, fought in the front ranks, wearing human armor marked with a single word in script. The word was defector. He wanted his former comrades to see him. He wanted them to know that one of their own had chosen to stand with humanity. The garrison was already weakened by months of constant fighting. Their supplies were running low. Their morale was broken. When the full weight of the human counterattack hit them, they crumbled. For the first time in the thousand-year history of the hegemony, a force surrendered. Thousands of warriors laid down their weapons rather than face the humans who had already killed so many of their brothers. They knelt in the rubble of the city they had failed to conquer, and they waited for death. The humans did not kill them. Watched as the prisoners were gathered and treated with something he had never expected. The humans fed them. They treated their wounds. They did not torture or humiliate them. This confused the captives more than anything else. They had been taught that mercy was weakness. But here were the humans, victorious and merciful, and they were clearly not weak. In the weeks that followed, reconstruction began. The humans started rebuilding their shattered city before the fires were even fully out. They worked side by side, soldiers and civilians, clearing rubble and raising new structures. Some of the prisoners volunteered to help. They were not sure why. Perhaps they were beginning to understand what had learned. One evening stood on a hill overlooking Harmon City. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Below him, he could hear the sounds of construction, and rising above it, the sound of children laughing. The humans had already started having celebrations. Even in the midst of rebuilding, they found reasons to sing and dance and smile. Captain Torres found him there. She stood beside him in silence for a while, watching the city come back to life. "What will you do now?" she asked finally. Considered the question. "I cannot go home," he said. "I am an enemy of my own people. The hegemony will hunt me until I die." He paused, watching a group of human children chasing each other through the streets below. "But perhaps I can help others of my kind understand what I have learned." "And what have you learned?" He turned to look at her. This small human woman who had shown more courage than any warrior he had ever known. He thought about everything he had witnessed since landing on this world. The soldiers who fought to the last breath. The civilians who picked up weapons. The medic who shared his food with an enemy. The old teacher who explained human history with gentle patience. The children who still played even in a war zone. "I have learned that true dread is not the fear of death," said slowly. "True dread is realizing that everything you believed was wrong, that the universe is not as you were taught, that there are beings who will never kneel, never break, who will fight until there is nothing left and then find something more." He looked back at the city, at the stubborn, impossible humans who refused to accept defeat. "I have learned to fear humanity," said softly. "I have learned to respect them, and somewhere along the way I learned to love them too." Torres smiled. It was the first real smile he had ever seen her give. "Welcome to the family," she said. "It is messy and loud and sometimes terrible, but we look after our own." Walked back toward the city as night fell. He walked toward the humans who had become his people, carrying a truth that would one day reach the stars. The hegemony had made a mistake when they attacked Prime. They had awakened something they could not defeat. They had awakened humanity. And humanity, once awakened, would never sleep again. The end.